The Chicago Bears have made some of the most significant moves in the last couple of off seasons, and it looks like now the foundation is finally there for them to start the ascent. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. It's my number 23 team in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Chicago Bears. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Right here, I'm actually going to put it up. I'm going to remember to put it up this time. Is the formula I used to come up with these rankings, so it's completely almost unbiased minus the rankings I have for people. So how it works out is what you just saw. Now, Chicago has, like I said, made some very significant moves. It started when they had the number 1 overall pick in Justin Fields at quarterback. They traded it to acquire it was DJ Moore, and they got a couple of draft picks there, including a first-round pick next year from the Carolina Panthers, so they could take Bryce Young. They used that pick on Caleb Williams, who's now their quarterback. And then they were just trying to figure out the influx of coaching issues that they had. And in order to fully invest in Caleb Williams, they went out and got the number 1 head coaching candidate, at least rookie head coaching candidate. That was Ben Johnson, the former offensive coordinator from the Detroit Lions. We'll get to the type of impact that he could possibly have on this team, and specifically on Caleb Williams. That's the investment here. They've done a great job of building up the weaponry. In particular, I really like the drafting of Luther Burden III. We're going to get to him and why I think that impact is significant. They also drafted Colston Loveland, a new tight end, a receiving tight end. Get to why that is very significant. Pair him up with Cole Kmet, run a lot of 12 personnel with DeAndre Swift in the backfield, and an offensive line that they put almost all their offseason eggs into that basket, free agency-wise. Traded for Joe Thuney, traded for Jonah Jackson, signed Drew Dahlman, rebuilt the entire interior of the offensive line. They got 2 very underappreciated and underrated tackles as well, making up one of the best offensive lines in the game. Now, a big issue Chicago has had for a while now is the defensive side of the football. They went and they got Dennis Allen to be the defensive coordinator. We'll get to his impact on this team and sort of the deficiencies that still exist with the Chicago Bears in particular when it comes to them trying to find that second edge rusher. They drafted Austin Booker last year knowing he wasn't going to be ready. Is this the year that he breaks out? They do have a little placeholder there in Dio Adeyingbo. They got some interesting depth on the interior of the defensive line, bringing in Grady Jarrett as well from Atlanta. The linebackers sort of plateaued, maybe on the downward swing there, but still passable in a lot of ways, and a secondary that's continuously growing that they've invested really well in. But the pressure is all on this coaching staff, and it's like I said, the best head coaching candidate that was out there is Chicago's new head coach from the Detroit Lions, and that's so Ben Johnson is my 15th ranked head coach, kind of smack dab in the middle, the bottom half of the upper crust, so to speak, I guess. He was the cream of the crop. He was the belle of the ball, the insert cliche here for head coaches the last 2 seasons, really, and him choosing to stay in Detroit and try to have one last run at it. The disappointing end to that season. I think he saw this opportunity in Chicago, just with the roster that they had already, to really grab onto a situation that he could sink his teeth into with the quarterback, with the weapons, with some of the pieces on the offensive line. They did a great job building this offense really in one season, one off season, to form what Ben Johnson, similar to what he had in Detroit just the year prior. They made sure they brought in some really strong zone blocking offensive linemen. They invested heavily in that with Drew Dahlman at center, with Joe Thuney at left guard, trading for Jonah Jackson as well, former Detroit Lion offensive lineman. So there's really good pieces there. They drafted Luther Burden III in the second round. He's going to slide into that Amon-Ra St. Brown role, which Ben Johnson really put Amon-Ra on the map. He was one of the few pure slot wide receivers that was viewed as one of the best wide receivers in the game. And that was because of Ben Johnson's scheme, Ben Johnson's play calling, and just how he loved to utilize the slot wide receiver. So Luther Burden has a huge opportunity to make an impact right away. They drafted Colston Loveland as well to play tight end, despite having Cole Kmet. So they went out, got their Sam Laporta. So Ben Johnson really took a giant swing here in his first couple of months as the coach, really laying a foundation for his offense. Now, bringing in Declan Doyle, who's my 30th ranked offensive coordinator, just because the experience level is just not there. He was the Broncos tight ends coach, I believe, as well. Interesting that he didn't bring in someone from that Detroit Lions staff to be the offensive coordinator. We talked about that a bit in the previous Jets video about just maybe some red flags within that Detroit coaching staff. I mean, nobody knew that coaching staff, that offensive staff, better than Ben Johnson did. So I think it says a lot. But then there's also the whole thing of where he's going to be the guy calling the plays on the offensive side of the ball. So building up a newer, inexperienced coordinator to eventually then move on and be a play caller somewhere else, that could be a strategy as well of Ben Johnson to raise up certain coaches that he views highly, like a Declan Doyle. Then there's Antoine Randall, who's positioned right now as like an assistant head coach type of a role as well. Like he's got the slash in there, member of the offensive staff, but he seems to be somebody who could be groomed to eventually be the offensive coordinator when Declan Doyle inevitably moves on to a team where he'd be able to be a play caller, or if he just doesn't really thrive in this role, in this promotion. Eric Bieniemy is there as the running backs coach. That's a very interesting signing. We sort of saw Bieniemy completely fail after leaving Andy Reid. So him going back to being just a straight up positions coach, trying to rebuild his reputation in the league. They're going to need a lot of production out of their running back room. We saw what Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery did for the Detroit Lions, and Ben Johnson, he relies heavy on a nice running back rotation, uses them a lot in a lot of different ways. DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, among others, are going to need to get up to speed and get up to speed fast. So bringing in Eric Bieniemy is a very aggressive attempt at doing that. One of the most aggressive signings was Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator. He's my 5th ranked defensive coordinator. Now, look back at the video last year when I did on the Saints, he was one of the lowest ranked head coaches in the league. I've just never viewed him as a good head coach, an even average head coach. He's a mediocre at his best as a head coach. As a defensive coordinator, as a defensive mind, he is one of the pure best. He falls into that category that I put people like Josh McDaniels on the offensive side, where they're just such great coordinators and they need to be utilized in that sense and not necessarily being head coaches. Now, this is a huge opportunity for Ben Johnson as well, and a very smart signing, because I don't think after Dennis Allen's 2 complete failures as a head coach, really, where nothing was really developed, teams never really got better under him as a head coach, but as a defensive guy, he can settle in here and no one's going to be beating down the door to bring Dennis Allen in as a head coach. So the continuity that you can get on the offense and defensive side of the ball here from 2 top-level elite minds on each side of the ball, the sky is the limit for what this team can become. Now, Dennis Allen is going to have to work with some average and depleted and aging players on the defense that have prominent roles. I think of the linebacking group that sort of, since coming in as a free agent pairing, hasn't really lived up to the production that Edwards and Edmonds had in Buffalo and Philadelphia respectively. But Dennis Allen did great work with Demario Davis, so I could look to see at least one of those linebackers breaking out in that sense. Pete Werner developed really well as a solid linebacker too in New Orleans, so him raising those guys back up and sort of living up to those free agency signings is going to be a task. Also developing a second edge rusher opposite of Montez Sweat. Got a nice little interior defensive line group and a secondary that is going to have some versatility and a nice rotation as well. So Dennis Allen's got some pieces to work with here, and his ability as a play caller, as a strategist, to complement Ben Johnson's overall team strategy. I think it's going to be a really good mix here. And Ben Johnson, as he grows as a head coach, there's guys here to have Dennis Allen, who does have head coaching experience, is important as well. And he's got some older, more experienced position coaches and consultants and stuff on the staff as well to help him along the way. And a great mentor in Dan Campbell, who did amazing things in terms of culture building in Detroit, taking a team that was so depleted, a fan base that was so pessimistic about everything, to make them right now one of the best teams in the league with one of the best cultures in the league, a winning attitude. Ben Johnson's ability to take that and apply it in his own way here in Chicago, which frankly doesn't get talked about enough, how similar of a situation it is in terms of the culture that has developed in Chicago over the last 30 years. There hasn't really been this tremendous winning culture. Lovie Smith sort of had them as that perpetual middle of the pack, always kind of going to make the playoffs, but never really going to do anything outside of the 1 year. They had like 2 years where the 1 year they went to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman, probably should have won, but then after that, it wasn't really until that Jay Cutler year where he got injured in the third quarter. Everything sort of surrounding that was just an unfair roller coaster for a franchise so storied. So this is another great culture adjustment signing, bringing in Ben Johnson as well, let alone his high-level trajectory that people are seeing for him as a mind in the NFL and as a coach. This could be a great long-term signing to help really turn this franchise around and get them back to being that respected historical franchise from, that they were in the 80s, that they were in the 60s and the 50s and all that. Such a long time ago, but this is how you go about doing it. The previous signings of Eberflus and all that, it just didn't make sense, to make those types of signings. It doesn't really make sense to me to sign defensive-minded head coaches unless you're getting like the top echelon guys. You want that in this league where the turnover of them just looking for great offensive minds. This was the best move the Bears could have made for their franchise and for their quarterback, Caleb Williams, who does need some consistency and some guidance to get to the levels that people think he can get to. And there it is, my number 23 team in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Chicago Bears. Leave in the comment section below what you guys think of the Bears, what you think of my takes on the Bears as well. Subscribe to the channel. I mean, you made it this far, just hit the subscribe button. And you've made it this far also, if you haven't hit the thumbs up button, smash the thumbs up button. And I will see you guys with the next video next time. So Caleb Williams, he is my 25th ranked quarterback coming into this season with an 80 grade. Many may find that to be low for him. It'll be an interesting adjustment for him to get used to this system. It's going to be his second system in 2 years in the pros, his third if going back to his days in college. I think his fourth, actually, if you go back all of his college years, going back to Oklahoma and then USC. I think there was some carryover at Oklahoma and USC, but it's still a lot of different environments all at once for Caleb Williams, and that's not a good thing for a young quarterback. You want this quarterback to have consistency, and that's why I think getting Ben Johnson was another great signing for him, because Caleb Williams' rookie season, he was everything that you would expect from a rookie. When he was under pressure, he really wasn't all that great. When he was kept clean, he threw a good ball. Didn't throw a great deep ball last year. All of his greatness really came in that short area, that 0 to 9 yards. The intermediate routes, he was pretty good as well. Had an average play action game. The deep ball just wasn't there. He had 24 big time throws. He had 19 turnover worthy plays. So that's a lot of that gunslinging mentality. He got a lot of the Aaron Rodgers comparisons coming out, which I think in terms of an arm talent and his athleticism is still a fair comparison. We saw him do a really good job at times of being able to escape the pocket and avoid rushers and keep his eyes downfield and eventually complete the pass. But then there was other times where he was under pressure and he wasn't really allowing his eyes to do the work down the field, and he was making some mistakes. It's hard to hold that completely against him, but when you had quarterbacks like Drake May, who did a little bit better at that, when you have Jaden Daniels, who just did fantastic at that, it makes it so in a league where the expectations of rookie quarterbacks gets higher and higher and higher, it does create an unfair expectation. And I think Caleb Williams does have the skills. He does have the ability. He has the traits. He's got the upside to eventually see the potential that a number 1 overall pick in a draft should achieve. Another big issue that they had was the interior of that offensive line was inconsistent at best, and there's a lot of collapsing pockets from the interior if you watch a lot of Bears games as well, that as long as the opposing defense then it had disciplined edge rushers, Caleb Williams didn't really have a whole lot of places to go either. So it was a lot of just trying to trust some arm talent and trust his arm strength to make plays, and then trying to extend plays and just not being able to at times. So I think them repairing the interior of the offensive line is going to help him as well. They want to solidify that so the pockets aren't constantly collapsing on him. It allows him to step up, because unlike the number 2 overall pick, Jaden Daniels, who has such great athleticism, he's got like Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson athleticism that he can then lean on. Caleb Williams doesn't have that. He is a great athlete. He can escape. He can run. He'll get you a good scramble run every now and then. But his skill set in his game, he is best suited being that pocket passer, like Aaron Rodgers, like Patrick Mahomes, who are good athletes, but if they're resorting to running all that much, they're not going to produce at that level, because that's just not their game. And not having that to fall back on the way that Lamar Jackson does, the way that Jaden Daniels did, it makes it where having a more well thought out offensive scheme, more consistency in terms of the offensive line play, strong interior offensive line play to allow the quarterback to step up into the pocket, remain in there, navigate within it, and use his peripheral and use that instinct that Caleb Williams showed in college that he did so well. Once you are putting him in that position, that's when the production starts to go up. And I think with DJ Moore and Luther Burden and Rome Odunze, who they took in the first round last year, Colston Loveland, who took in the first round this year, they're giving him the weapons, and now the protection gets there. Now Caleb Williams can do what he did so well in college, which is process the game, get to that second and third read, work the different levels of the field, deep, intermediate, and short, and do it effectively, understanding when to take a shot down the field and when not to, not trying to play such hero ball all the time like we saw him do multiple times last year, and playing that hero ball under immense pressure, which I think resulted in a lot of the lower production in that situation of being under pressure, of having to throw it deep as well. The combination of throwing it deep and under pressure just was a complete losing equation for Caleb Williams last year. And that's why I think a lot of his best production came in the short areas, because it was a lot of just having to get the ball out on that first read, not really trusting the offensive line to be there for him, but also trusting that with the skill sets that they had, in like someone like DJ Moore, for example, who's able to run those short routes and run those quick slants and run the drag routes and everything. I think if you incorporate those things more, you'll be able to build some confidence here in Caleb Williams as well, and get him to trust that offensive line, because there is an instinct that quarterbacks get, especially when they are used to a certain level of play or lack thereof from the offensive line around them. For example, you'll see them have that happy feet and have that quicker trigger, where when you watch the film of it, you go, why did he do that? The offensive line did their job. It's having to go back to previous experience and having to knock that out of his head. So hopefully the new regime and everything, Caleb Williams has the mental toughness to sort of throw that away, because they have given him everything that he needs to succeed in terms of coaching and personnel around him. It's a true test of his mental toughness this year, I feel, more than his actual skills, which were there and always exhibited last year in some way, shape, or form throughout a game. So this weapons group comes in at 16th For me, it's a real tight race between that like 18 to 12, 18 to 11 range. It's real tight, and I think this group can very much outperform this ranking. We'll start here with DJ Moore, who is the wide receiver 1. He is everything that a borderline top 10 wide receiver is. I don't know that he's ever going to be a top 10 wide receiver, truly. I think if he hovers around, the 13th or 12th best wide receiver in the league, that's a really great place for him to be in. I think he can be schemed to perform better than what his overall skill set says. Now, he took 27, 28% of his snaps from the slot, which means that that's not going to be his role on this team. Ben Johnson's going to have him out there, and you got to look at it, keep comparing it to Detroit Lions. You're going to see the Jameson Williams role go to DJ Moore, what they wanted Jameson Williams to be, and what he sort of showed towards the end there. You get DJ Moore, who's a more polished, experienced, mature, maybe a little bit more shifty, especially in the short and intermediate areas than Jameson Williams. So I think that's going to open up a lot of opportunities here. And DJ Moore is going to be able to have this great season. Now, he had 98 catches last year for only 966 yards, which just goes back to what I was saying previously about Caleb Williams basically being forced to operate under 10 yards for most of last season due to some of the poor play, due to some maybe the poor offensive strategizing and play calling and planning. DJ Moore, very sure-handed, not going to drop a lot of passes, only had 3 drops on 137 targets last year. Contested catch, got about 21 contested catch opportunities and caught 10 of them, hovering around that 50%, which is not something you'd really expect from a guy of his size. Did everything well at a high level. The A- grades from deep, intermediate, short, behind the line of scrimmage. He did it all really well from that out wide receiver spot, traditional wide receiver role. Just again, there's still like that level above him. There's still that like Jamar Chase level, that CeeDee Lamb level, Justin Jefferson. Like there's still that next step that he needs to take. And I don't know that at this stage in his career that he isn't really reached what his peak is, which is, like I said, maybe the 12th best wide receiver in the league. Can he produce in a top 10 way? Yes. Gets a good matchup, catches fire there for a bit. We've seen him have monster performances, but then we've also seen him completely disappear in games as well. And that goes back to even his days in Carolina. So I don't know that you can completely blame that on the previous Chicago Bears regime that got him here. The last 2 years, I don't know if that's fair to the previous regime that was rightfully fired, but maybe DJ Moore's just that guy. I think we've seen a lot of great wide receivers in the league that just will disappear in games and stop them from being those true top 10 guys. Like an Amari Cooper, for example, notorious for having these monster performances and then just having weeks where you wonder if he was even playing the game at all. Is it an effort thing? I don't know. I've never really heard anything about DJ Moore lacking in the effort department. I've never heard about him being a locker room issue. I could be wrong. I let Bears and Panther fans fight that out in the comment section if I'm wrong about that, but he's always seemed to be just a dependable, solid guy in terms of a locker room and teammate. How that can translate into more consistent play on the field is yet to be seen. I think he's, again, sort of like Caleb Williams, he's got the best opportunity to do that with this staff that he's got. Then the next person up here is Luther Burden, who drafted in the second round, 85% of his snaps last year at Mizzou from the slot. He's coming in to very much take that Amon-Ra St. Brown role in this offense, and that's why he's the major breakout candidate here, and I think someone who's significantly under the radar for an offensive player of the year nomination, because you look at it, it's not an award that notoriously just goes to quarterbacks either. And we know it's not going to go to a lineman. So you look at some of the skill position players coming out, who's going into a true better position than Luther Burden III is going into here in Chicago? Is it Ashton Genty? Maybe. He might be the only one, though, that's going into truly a better situation than what Luther Burden is going into right now. You know, Travis Hunter is always going to have that hovering over top of him, but you look at some of the other running backs in the league, none of the other running backs have really went to a situation where they're the true number one guy. None of the other wide receivers in the draft, you know, you got Ted McMillan, who is going to be the number one receiver there, but there's a lot of mouths to feed there as well, and you don't really know what kind of a role he's going to have in that offense in comparison to the other guys on the field, like in Adam Thielen, for example. We kind of know what Luther Burden is going to be in this team. It's pretty much spelled out in what he produced in college and his size and his skill set. He's another guy who doesn't drop the ball a whole lot. He did really well deep down the field at Mizzou. So running those deep drags that we see Amon-Ra St. Brown run so well last year and the year prior to that, look for Luther Burden to take on that role, and he could be somebody who, it wouldn't surprise me at all if at the end of the year he was in that 90 catch range, over 1,000 yards, a handful of touchdowns with a lot of yards after the catch. And I think that could put him in great position to steal an Offensive Rookie of the Year award away from someone like Ashton Genty, who might not stand out. It might have a great season, I think, no doubt, but may not stand out as well as being like this dynamic, exciting playmaker. And I think Burden can really be a great feature of this overall offense. Really excited about what he can do and what he can bring to this team. Then you got Rome Odunze, who last year he was rookie, first round pick, top 10 pick, third wide receiver off the board, I believe, after Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. Didn't really do anything. You know, it's tough to play wide receiver at the next level as a rookie, especially if you're sort of got this mixed bag of what your role is going to be. I feel like he's going to be the other outside wide receiver opposite DJ Moore, and don't know if he's ever going to get the opportunity to live up to that top 10 pick, just because there's just constant other guys coming into this team that have so much more defined roles in the offense. And then you go back and you look at Ben Johnson's history as an offensive coordinator and as a play caller. You generally got great running back play in the passing game, great tight end play, and then great slot receiver play. So is Rome Odunze going to be able to compete with DJ Moore for these snaps? Is he going to be able to compete with Luther Burden for these snaps? It's going to be interesting to see where Rome Odunze fits into this scenario here. But the potential's all there. He's got the pedigree. He's got the, a top 10 pick is no joke. A top 10 pick and a good draft, no joke. So is the fact that he was part of the previous regime an issue? Maybe. That's why they bring in Luther Burden. That's why they have Zacchaeus there, who's also a really sneaky good player. That's why they get Devin Duvernay. Tyler Scott is there, but he's another guy that was sort of part of the previous regime. I don't know how much legs he has to stand on. Samori Toure from the Packers is there. Don't know what that looks like for him. But then they go out and they draft Colston Loveland, who is going to be this mixed bag, do-it-all tight end for this offense. They drafted him over Tyler Warren. They used a top 10 pick on him. You would expect him to be a much better contested catch guy than what he was. He was actually very poor as a contested catch guy. Got 10 opportunities at Michigan, only caught 2 of them. They didn't pass the ball particularly well at Michigan last year, so that could be a factor in all this. But in terms of being a route runner and his effectiveness at all 4 levels of the field, his tenacity as a run blocker to help out with that as well, I could see him doing a lot of motion, a lot of trying to mix it up there in between the hash marks and in between the numbers, trying to create mismatch issues and also open up opportunities for the faster, speedier guys like a DJ Moore and a Luther Burns sort of underneath and over top of him. A lot of those levels concepts I think could be used here to truly effectively use Colston Loveland throughout the season. He's another guy who just doesn't drop the ball, though. And I think that was a big feature of those two draft picks of Loveland and Burden, is that they don't drop the ball. They're sure-handed guys. They're not going to make giant mistakes that set the team back and get them off schedule. This is a team that's going to have to play with timing and on schedule, and Colston Loveland has been disciplined in that back to the Jim Harbaugh days to play it that type of a way. So he fits in really well into this type of an offense. And a great compliment in Cole Kmet, who you could see a lot of 12 personnel out there throughout the season. And you have two really effective receiving tight ends. I thought that going tight end was maybe a little redundant, but again, it's the new regime, different philosophies, different money, and there is a different skill set between Kmet and Loveland is a better player coming out. An issue that this weapons group does have that is a requirement of an effective Ben Johnson offense is at the running back position. Roschon Johnson and DeAndre Swift, neither one is somebody who I would ideally make my third down receiving back by any means, but they have been tasked with trying to somewhat recreate the Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery two-headed monster, and I think it'll be interesting to see which one of these two guys truly breaks out. Now, I feel like Roschon Johnson is probably the safer bet. Swift has sort of been around the block a few times. He was a part of the Detroit Lions team. They did trade him away and then replaced him with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. So that is something to watch in terms of maybe what Ben Johnson truly thinks of what DeAndre Swift's role could be on this team. They didn't draft a high-level running back, so I would expect Roschon Johnson to have a real opportunity here to establish himself. I think contract-wise as well, they'll be looking for that, but I could also see a situation where they mix this up a whole lot and we see someone like Luther Burden line up in the backfield. I don't think that that's all that far-fetched, especially if they want to get just more speed, more sure-handed receivers out there. You know, you get a Zacchaeus out there with three wide receivers, and then Burden's there also, you know, lining up in the backfield, running some motions out there with Loveland at tight end or Kmet at tight end or Loveland in the slot with Burden running some motion out of the backfield, trying to create these big mismatch issues, get the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands quick and put it in the hands of some of these playmakers. They are certainly rich in those. But circling back to the running back room here, they're tied for 25th for me. DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson. Roschon's never really had the opportunity to show what he could do. I did like him at Texas, but he was, again, trapped in the shadow of Bijan Robinson. Comes here, sort of gets lost in the shuffle to a degree as well. They bring in DeAndre Swift, who's like a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2 type at this point. Him sort of bouncing around, you know, Detroit and Philadelphia and now Chicago the last couple of seasons. He just hasn't gotten to that time where he was like peak DeAndre Swift in Detroit. I don't know if that's in him anymore at this point. I think, though, being a part of a healthy running back rotation would do him well. You know, you don't want him to carry the ball a million times here. You know, just last year he carried the ball 237 times, only had 3.8 yards per carry, fumbled it twice, didn't have a lot of big time runs either, didn't get over 1,000 yards. So does a more running back friendly system help him with that? We'll see. I think you maybe want to get his overall touches as a running back in running plays. I'd like to maybe see it between 180 and 200. because I would love to see him just be utilized as, this change of pace, agility driven running back, while letting Roschon Johnson and some of these other guys in there get opportunities to be more of like a bell cow back, because there's not a lot of mileage on these other 4 guys at all. The mileage is on Swift, and you want to be able to best utilize his skills by not just completely running him into the ground. And I do have a fear here that this running back room doesn't have the right people in it, and that Swift is going to just be completely run into the dirt, not be able to play the whole season, and then the offense gets kind of stymied there by not having a great running back or even a mediocre running back. They missed out on Nick Chubb, which I think is a huge mistake. I think they're going to live to maybe regret that at least some point in the season, because the assumption that this running back room is going to stay healthy, even in the state that it's in, is just not realistic, especially with how often running backs get used by Ben Johnson and the ways they get used. So this is the main concern here for what could inevitably drag this offense down long term throughout the season. And I think this will be a more likely than not a true point of contention to be addressed next offseason, maybe in the draft, maybe in free agency, depending on who pops up. But they rebuilt all these other groups, didn't do anything with this running back room. And to me, that's sort of, it's a mixed bag. It's a bit of a red flag, because now it's like I said, this room's going to drag him down. Or it's a green flag that Ben Johnson sees something within this group that I just don't. So this is the thing to watch on this offense, inevitably. Of course, along with the quarterback production and quarterback progression. But DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, this is your group. The one thing that they do have is one of the best offensive lines in the entire league out in front of them. You look at this group, and obviously Jonah Jackson is your weak link here. But you look at some of the depth pieces, Luke Newman, maybe Ozzie Trapillo can go into guard, and you might be able to upgrade that. Jonah Jackson just seems to be more of a short-term fix for this offensive line. Just get a veteran in there that knows the system to some degree. And there's no real harm in him being the worst offensive lineman in this group, considering the quality of what this group is. And it starts with, by my estimation, one of the most underrated left tackles in the entire league, and that's Braxton Jones. He gave up 5 sacks last year in 471 snaps, took 7 penalties. But he's like a quintessential, just solid left tackle. And I think that there was the calls to replace him in the draft by like picking up Kelvin Banks or Will Campbell or even Armand Membu and kicking him to left tackle. I felt like they was very short-sighted to a very large degree, because it's hard to find a solid anchor for your left tackle position. And Braxton Jones being picked up in, I think he was a 5th round pick. I know he was a day 3 pick. Maybe it was the 5th round, maybe it was the 6th. For him to have come in, played so well right out the gate, beat out competition. There was a real competition when he came into this team for that left tackle role. He beat out a bunch of guys and has done a great job of maintaining his role. And is he ever going to get past this grade of like an 81? I don't know. Maybe not. The reason he goes on a day 3 in the draft is because they don't feel like those players have the high ceiling traits to true. That's what the 1st round picks and the 2nd round picks and even some of the 3rd round picks are for. So maybe this is as good as he's ever going to be, but it becomes a situation where he becomes like the left tackle, the Kirk Cousins quarterback of left tackles, where, okay, who you could do better, but can you? Like, there are better, but can you do better? And why would you want to throw it off and throw off the consistency and like the high floor that Braxton Jones brings to you as a left tackle pass blocker I think him coming in, playing the Taylor Decker role in this offense that we saw him thrive in, and he's a good run blocker as well. So his balance of play, I think, is a real asset to this offensive line. And I think that, it's short-sighted to maybe want to move on from him. Will come contract season that is right around the corner for him, I believe. We'll see what that ends up looking like. But they gave him a true great compliment right next to him in the veteran Joe Thuney, who, all things considered, all things hopeful, he just plays left guard this year. He played some left tackle for the Chiefs last year and actually played fantastic in that role for, I think, 4, 5, maybe 6 games. He played left tackle last year. He took 829 pass snaps, gave up 2 sacks. Keep in mind, played tackle a lot in that process and still only gave up 2 sacks for the whole season. 35 pressures, but took 1 penalty. I mean, he is played as well as anybody on the offensive line, and it was a very, very calculated trade to get him onto this team to assist in the one thing that we talked about earlier with Caleb Williams, which was prevent those collapsing interior areas of the pocket that was really ruining the offense all of last year on passing downs. And his versatility, I think, is a huge asset as well. Obviously, you don't want him to have to play tackle, but if an injury gets picked up and you feel a lot better about the interior depth than the tackle depth, Joe Thuney, can kick him, play left tackle, and he's pretty much going to give you maybe a little bit less overall than what you're getting from Braxton Jones now. So he's certainly an amazing asset in that sense. And of course, his zone run blocking ability coming in such a zone heavy scheme that is run by Ben Johnson. Tremendous asset. Then you got Drew Dahlman, who comes in, and he was brought in because of that grade right there, A- in zone blocking. 76% of his snaps last year were zone blocking run snaps, were zone blocking on 259 run plays that he was a part of. So this is what he does. Snaps the ball, gets out of his stance quick, gets his hands on the guy, and uses athleticism to stretch the field. And you look at the Detroit Lions last year, I think they ran 68% of their run plays were zone run plays. Dahlman doesn't have like the size and the strength to play gap all that well. But again, I think it was a very calculated signing along with Joe Thuney to bring him in. It really showed the direction they want to take this offense in, and getting one of the best centers in the entire league, who even as a pass blocker doesn't need to be all that great. He's, as a center and pass blocking, you're going to be working a lot of double teams most of the time, and they're going to be shifting those double teams to the right side. Him and Jonah Jackson will be doing that sort of together. You would assume that they'd be much more comfortable isoing Joe Thuney along with the 2 tackles and working the nose tackle the best they can with their 2 with Dahlman and Jonah Jackson. How opposing defenses attack the A gaps and the right side B gap with blitzes and stunts and twists will be something to watch, because these are the 2 guys they're going to want to take advantage of in passing situations, is Dahlman and Jackson. Then you got Darnell Wright, another first round pick, another top 10 pick of a previous regime. But man, oh man, you talk about his play last year as a zone blocker. Only 40% of the snaps that he took last year as the Bears right tackle were zone run game, but he was an A+ zone blocker last year. Now that number is going to get significantly higher, and it's going to allow him to use this skill set that he showed so well last season. There's a lot to be excited about here. Even as a gap blocker, he was still above average, with that B- grade. So there's a lot to go on here for Darnell Wright as a run blocker especially. And again, I keep going back to Detroit because it's Ben Johnson bringing that system over. The right tackle of the Detroit Lions, Penei Sewell. Under Ben Johnson, at right tackle, notoriously one of the best offensive linemen in the league. And a very similar professional output in terms of what Penei Sewell has been good at as a pro, and what Darnell Wright's been good at as a pro. Now, Sewell's a much better pass blocker than Darnell Wright, so we'll see how Darnell Wright develops as a pass blocker continually moving forward. But when you got these two tackles out here anchoring, and then you got these interior offensive linemen that are hopefully going to make things a lot easier for Caleb to step up in the pockets, the 9th best pass blocking offensive line, the 4th ranked run blocking offensive line. This is how you build a truly effective offense. Ben Johnson taking that strategy from what Dan Campbell showed him in Detroit is you build a great offensive line, and then you get very talented skill sets around them to use their skills to the best of their ability. You get these specialists, and they got this zone run blocking specialist offensive line with incredibly solid pass blocking to be a great foundation to build off of for this offense. Again, you go back to some of the depth. Trapillo, it'll be interesting to see where he fits in. Kieran Emagadeji, he was from the last regime. I don't know how much legs he truly has. And you got Bill Murray, you got Ryan Bates, and you got rookie Luke Newman. There's going to be some competition in there for the depth, but a huge positive for this group is they know who their starting 5 is. They know exactly where they fit in, and they all have complementary skill sets to one another. And this is a tremendous, tremendous upside for this entire offense for the next couple of seasons, especially. Now, even with all that, it may shock you to see that it is the 26th ranked offense for me. 24th pass offense, 19th rush offense. Now, the rush offense, I think, kind of speaks for itself. They got a great offensive line and a running back room that just kind of is uninspiring and too many question marks without really a true high-end guy to project so far. So that's where they sort of hover. Now, the passing offense, you look at Caleb Williams and what Caleb Williams is going to be able to do this season and how quickly he comes up to speed. This is, for me, again, week 1 where this team is. There is no doubt in my mind. Bears fans, don't worry. There's no doubt in my mind that this won't end the season as probably the 15th or 16th ranked offense in the entire league, which I think is exactly where you'd want to be with a first-year head coach, a second-year quarterback, first time with them working together. You want to see them come in, which is this, questionable, because they weren't a great offense last year, let's be honest. But as they work the new system with the new players, building some chemistry here with the offensive line and the weapons and all that, if they can progress and they can jump 10 to 12 spots, which I think is very realistic, then you're going into next season going, okay, now we got these little pieces here that we just have to fill in, and it rounds out an offense that has now top 10 potential in the entire league. So you're getting there. There's just some experience that needs to be built up throughout the season and throughout this training camp and throughout preseason and all that. Now we're going to get to the defensive side of the ball where, like I said, Dennis Allen is in charge of taking this over. This is really his wheelhouse, being a great defensive coordinator. I think there's a lot of guys on this team that are really going to benefit from him, his strategizing, his coaching ability, and just the way he develops defensive players. And it starts with the defensive line and the number 1 edge rusher. We got Montez Sweat really being the feature of this defensive line. He is a true edge 1 in the league, coming off of a bit of a down season last year, but I still think very highly of Montez Sweat. He only had 6 sacks on 49 pressures, 22nd league in pass rush win percentage. He had 2 batted balls, took 612 snaps. I had a couple over the tackle snaps, but he was mostly outside guy, 80, 90 something percent of his snaps. as an outside edge rusher. He comes in with an 89 grade for me because I do feel like this is the bounce back year for him, with a very competent defensive coordinator, one of the best defensive coaches in the entire league to work with. And they've done a good job of building up some complementary players for him on the interior of the line, and they've hopefully can develop somebody to be an edge number 2 for him. But when you have a player like him who's got this great speed, this great get off, and is able to convert speed to power with a really good bull rush, he's an ideal edge number 1 for your team to have. Can he develop a little bit more in the run game? Maybe, but I mean, he's again a solid run defender as well. Definitely not a liability in any aspect of his game. Now, what you would like to see for him is to take his pass rushing just up to that next level, because right now he sort of falls into that low end of tier 2 in terms of edge rushers for me. There's like the tier 1 that's in Hutchinson and Myles Garrett and TJ Watt and Max Crosby, and then there's that second tier where you get into like, Montez Sweat, Brian Burns, those types of guys. I would like to see him take a step forward here at this stage in his career. Get that second wind, adding maybe some pass rushing moves, some strategy, adding maybe a little bit more strength, stronger IQ in certain situations, being able to pick up, play actions and all that a little bit better, anticipate quarterback movement in the pocket maybe a little bit better. But by all intents and purposes, still a top level edge rusher. I'm sort of just nitpicking at his skill set at this point, just to see where I can maybe figure out a place for him to develop. But the true leader of the 16th ranked pass rush coming into the league this year, his complement right now is Deo Adeyingbo. Is a fine number 2. I think the real goal inevitably by the end of the season is for Austin Booker to be the number 2 edge guy. They picked him up last year, the previous regime, but they still picked him up anticipating him having a high ceiling and not really being ready to play right away. Another year in college I think would have done Booker really well, but he wanted to get paid, he wanted to come out, ended up being a 4th round pick. Good for him. I think you'll see him worked in just straight up pure pass rush situations, get him some experience out there. I think Dennis Allen will find a fancy little role for him as well. Daniel Hardy, I think, will get some early down work throughout the year. But for most of the season, I'd say for the first half of the season, look to see a lot of Sweat and a lot of Adeyingbo as the 2 defensive ends there. When you get to the interior, they got 3 really solid interior players, and we'll start with Gervin Dexter, who I'm much higher on than most. I'll admit it. He gets a 79 grade for me in run defense and pass rush. He was 72nd in stops percentage just last season. He had an 8% missed tackle rate. I think he flashed a lot of really good qualities, and I think that his got like a sneaky athleticism to him as well. And I think now being part of a healthier interior defensive line rotation, we're going to get more of his best than maybe what we saw last year, where he was meh at times. But the complement of Andrew Billings there at nose tackle, a great pass rushing interior defensive lineman. He did only have 1 sack on 14 pressures, but he was 14th in pass rush win rate. A gap, B gap is where he lived. 11 hurries, 2 hits. I think constantly taking on double teams the way that a bigger nose tackle would, and that's really what his role is going to be on this defensive line. I thought he did really well, and I think that his ability to do that is going to open up so many other opportunities for Gervin Dexter and for the veteran Grady Jarrett, who's coming over from Atlanta, who has been on a downward trajectory the last couple of seasons. Hopefully now the change of scenery with Dennis Allen, and he'll be able to get back to maybe a 25% boost to his play, because coming in he's 70 pass rush for me, but gets a 79 in the run game. I think he's going to be utilized at least a lot in those situations. I think he'd be very effective there. I think this will be a nice little healthy 3-man rotation for the interior defensive line. I look at Chris Williams as being a sneaky player to come in and pick up some snaps as well. I think he's a really solid depth piece for them to have as like a 4th interior defensive lineman as of right now, especially when you got Billings and Jarrett, who are a little bit on the older side in comparison to most. They drafted Shamar Turner, who I wasn't that high on, but it was clear he was kind of a developmental piece in here, especially with all the veteran presences that they have. He's going to get an opportunity to develop here. They sought him out specifically as this group. And then Zach Pickens, I think, is the odd one out here from the previous regime. I don't know. They won't keep 6 interior defensive linemen. They'll probably keep 5 at most. And he just seems like he's the odd one out in this scenario because he's never really outplayed Gervin Dexter at all. And he doesn't have the traits that a Andrew Billings has. And then the experience and the upside of potential of what Grady Jarrett could bring with a new scenery change, like we just said. So he hasn't shown that he is worth keeping in this type of a room here, even though they are the 27th ranked defensive line in terms of run defense. That really seems to be where he needs, if he's going to make the team, he needs to show a significant leap in that ability, and the ability to be a run defender from the interior. How long he's on the team to be able to prove that and to be able to establish that, I don't know if it's going to be all that long, but maybe another team will pick him up and he'll get a second opportunity to play in this league. Now the linebackers, we touched on that a little bit when talking about Dennis Allen during the coaching period. And this is what I mean. Now, they came in as 2 very high-profile free agency pickups. They were probably the 2 best linebackers in the free agency class. Both came here to Chicago. They come into this year tied for 20th in coverage and tied for 28th in run defense. I'm not overly enthused about what they put on the field last year. Edmonds and you expected more athleticism, maybe a little bit smarter play. Now, again, you talk about how Matt Eberflus developed linebackers. I thought Matt Eberflus had a pretty good history of using linebackers. You go back to Bobby Okereke and Darius Leonard. I thought that maybe this would have worked out a hell of a lot better than it has so far. Now with Dennis Allen, he's got the history of Demario Davis, of Pete Werner. So maybe he can get something out of this group because, TJ Edwards, he had 90 tackles last year. He had a 9.3 missed tackle rate. He was 55th in stops percentage. Got targeted significantly in the passing game. Gave up a lot of yards as well. A 112.9 passer rating. So there is cause for concern there. You don't love that at all from a guy who is probably supposed to be your best cover linebacker. I think he can bounce back from that. And then you got the high level athleticism of Tremaine Edmonds. That's sideline to sideline speed. He was 84th though in stops percentage. He had an 8.6 missed tackle rate. He was also targeted in the passing game, gave up quite a bit of yards as well, a 92.9 pass rating. He had 4 pass breakups, so his athleticism, his closing speed was still kind of there. But when he had that final year in Buffalo, he was a dominant linebacker. All over the field, breaking up passes, wrapping up running backs in the run game, chasing guys down from behind. He was doing a whole lot more than what he's done as a Chicago Bear. So we will see how that further develops. But overall, these are the 2 guys they need to lean on because you can see from the depth here, there isn't a whole lot at all in terms of depth. It's a lot. It's 4 guys competing for probably 2 spots. One of those guys will be on the team because he will establish himself as a special teams guy, a specialist in that sense. The other one is going to be the one that they're the most comfortable with, being a linebacker 3 out on the field as a rotational guy. And I would have said Noah Sewell previously, but the opportunities he's gotten, he hasn't taken advantage of them at all. So this is just very much up in the air. I mean, take your pick as to which 2 of those 4 are going to last. I don't know if they dip back into free agency, but this group is an injury away from being the worst linebacking group in the league. So they need to, throughout this camp and throughout the preseason, really establish linebacker 3 and 4 here. And that's the task that Dennis Allen has truly above everything else, because this is the one position group on this defense that has this amount of question marks, specifically around the depth pieces. Now, like we just covered the defensive line, you can really carve out like what everyone's role is on the defensive line. When we get to the secondary in a minute or two, you'll see where everyone's role is sort of carved out. Outside of your top 2 starters, there's no roles carved out, and there's not a lot of upside there either. So that's a concern. It's a concern that the second level is setting up to be potentially so depleted that it could drag down this defense more than you would otherwise want it to, and can affect the overall performance, unfortunately. Now we're looking at the defensive backs, and they're 14th for me in pass coverage, tied for 2nd against the run. This is what I mean by, like we just said with the linebackers, of you know what you're getting from the defensive line, and you kind of know what you're getting here from the defensive backs. You got a great cornerback 1 in Jalen Johnson, who did take a bit of a step back last year from his amazing breakout performance just 2 years prior. 32 on 51 targets, 424 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 4 pass breakups, 85.7 pass rating when targeted. That's very good. That's very good. He was a B+ in zone coverage, did struggle in man coverage, which his aggressive play, because that's one thing about Jalen Johnson, he plays very, very aggressive. He's very hands-on. He'll hit you hard. He's not afraid to stick his head in there to make a tackle and attack a wide receiver, and that does get him caught sometimes. Now, 2 years ago, it got him caught significantly less than it did this year, especially when he was having to chase guys around the field and all that. It was a lesser performance. Now, still a high-level performance nonetheless. I feel like I'm kind of doing this Jalen Johnson thing I did with DJ Moore and Montez Sweat, where you're nitpicking at their skill sets here. And playing consistently great at the cornerback position is also very hard, especially in the modern NFL. So the fact that he was able to still produce somewhat where he was at his true top best season, which was 2 years ago, says a lot about what I can project for Jalen Johnson moving forward. Now, his complement as another outside corner is a competition that's up in the air here. Terrell Smith and Tyreek Stevenson. Stevenson, sort of like Austin Booker, maybe came out a year early and has had opportunities to develop here, and I think that he's flashed some really good moments, and he's also shown that he's still got a long way to go. At the beginning of the season, to me, he's the 4th best cornerback on the team. I would much prefer Terrell Smith and his higher floor and its more aggressive play in the run game than Tyreek Stevenson early on in the year. The one thing Dennis Allen did very well in New Orleans was getting the cornerback room to play well together. He had that Marshawn Lattimore cornerback 1, and then he had Paulson Adebo, who he was able to bring up as a cornerback 2. I would like to see Tyreek Stevenson by the end of the season get to that Paulson Adebo level. and then hopefully eventually exceed it as they keep executing his skill set, because his traits are what really got people hyped up about him at the University of Miami. He had like mild first round buzz for a while there, ended up going in the second round though. But for a guy who wasn't ready for the NFL, that was a well-established guy who wasn't really ready for the NFL, that says a lot about what the league thought of his traits, what this organization thinks of his traits, and we'll see if Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen agree with that by how he's utilized in the lead up to the regular season. Kyler Gordon is your slot nickel corner. What a breakout season he had last year. Didn't get a lot of, didn't force turnovers, really. 682 snaps from the slot, only 4 from the traditional corner position. Again, same thing with Jalen Johnson. It didn't seem like this team played very well in man coverage last year. Is that indicative of Matt Eberflus, or is that because they just are better zone defensive backs? Let this year be the deciding factor with a new defensive mind in there. But if they are just zone guys, just play zone, and you're going to get high-level production out of the slot. Again, Kyler Gordon's another guy, plays aggressive in the run game. They got really aggressive physical defensive backs on this team, which allows you to move them around, which allows you to play with matchups a lot more. Because I think a big pitfall that a lot of teams have is that they'll have quarterbacks who aren't very physical. And that puts them in bad positions when you may play a team that is a little bit bigger and more physical and more hard-nosed. Those cornerbacks will struggle. And they will attack those cornerbacks. They're in a great position here because there's not really anyone you can attack in that way. Now, how they will attack them, obviously, is they'll set them up to have to play man coverage and then just out-athletic them to a degree. You got like super high athletic receivers like Miami does, for example, with Hill and Waddle. If you put this Bears team in a situation where they have to play man coverage and you're running those crossing routes and those deep drags and everything like that, then you're really going to exploit this cornerback room. But if you don't have that type of skill set and allows Dennis Allen to maybe dictate the way the game is played from the defensive side of the ball, you got a great little group here. Now, depth-wise, Speed, Blackwell, Nick McLeod. Don't really know who the fifth one is there. They got Zah Frazier as a rookie. Don't really know anything about him. He could be somebody that can slide right into that spot. Then you got the safety room, which they got like an interior defensive line level quality group here where they can have a rotation of any of these 2 of these 4 guys or 3 of these 4 guys on the field at the same time. It wouldn't surprise me if all 4 of them are on the field at the same time, just because of how mixed up their skill sets are. Talk about Kevin Byard first, who really reinvented himself since leaving Tennessee. He was that deep third safety who was ball hawking at Tennessee, then went to Philadelphia and developed this aggressive, physical play in the run game that he's sustained now through his time now with the Bears. 100 tackles. He had 5 pass breakups. He played 365 box snaps, 102 slot snaps, which end up being almost the equivalent to what he was playing as a true safety. This reinvention of himself, I think, has added years to his career and has made him a much more fun, balanced player. Now, as he gets older, the ability in coverage obviously is going to deplete, but because he's added the physicality, they're going to be able to play him across the entire back end here, especially when you got a compliment like Jaquan Brisker, who's sort of almost the same type of a player now that Kevin Byard has turned into. Then you got Jonathan Owens, who in the run game was as good as it came last year. And I could see him coming in playing a very physical role if they want to get Byard maybe off the field, or Then you got Elijah Hicks, who plays a very balanced role as a safety as well. All these guys could all be significant contributors to this team, and the ability to move Byard into the box and put Hicks as a deep third safety with Brisker maybe, as like the robber role or something. There's a whole lot they can do of mixing and matching at the deepest level on the back end here. And they got the athleticism, they got the coverage ability where they can help out over the top with Terrell Smith or Tyreek Stevenson, while Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon operate sort of on their own islands. When they get into dime packages, they're going to be able to play physically, so they won't necessarily get caught in those dime packages with their pants down and have teams be able to run and out physical them in those scenarios and sort of trick them into that. They got the bodies to be able to make that work. So they've done a good job building this group up. Dennis Allen's going to have a real fun time maneuvering these guys around, scheming them up, and creating matchup scenarios that really benefit this team and will make life easier for that front seven to get pressure on the quarterback and to shut things down and to let some of these ball hawking guys start to make really big plays. So it is my 16th ranked defense, smack dab in the middle of the league. The 30th run defense, so that is a concern. It's a concern to me that this team is going to fall behind in some games and not be able to allow themselves to catch up. That they're not going to be able to stop the run, so opposing offense is going to be able to stay on the field late in games, and they're not going to be able to get their offense on the field with enough time to, score that last-minute field goal to tie the game or win the game or score that touchdown when you're down by 4 or down by 6 or whatever. So this is the concern here. So you're hoping that you can improve on the defensive line in the run defense in particular, because having a great defensive back group against the run only gets you so far. They're great at maintaining and being great complements to what you have in the front seven, but the front seven being so weak at that coming into the year could create some situations where this team won't win as much as they probably should. And they come in with the second hardest schedule in the league, so the 8.5 win projection that they have, I'm taking that under, and I'm pretty much taking it all day. They got to play Detroit twice, obviously. They got to play Philadelphia on the road, San Francisco on the road, Baltimore on the road, Washington on the road, the Raiders on the road, and talk about Ashton Genty and that weak run defense. That plays right into the Raiders' wheelhouse there. Obviously, they play Detroit twice, Green Bay twice, Minnesota twice. They got some home games against the Giants and the Steelers in that second half of the year where they could possibly win those games, but really it's that home game against Dallas, the home game against the Saints, and then the home game against Cleveland where I look at it and I go, those are for sure 3 wins. Getting Cincinnati towards the end of October, beginning of November, that's a rough spot to pick them up, especially going on the road to play them. That first game of the year against Minnesota, that could be one they could catch them at. That first game of the year is such a wild card game. I mean, we saw Chicago beat the 49ers in week 1 the year the Niners went to the Super Bowl. So, you can really surprise teams early in the season, so that's where you really want to take advantage of this. But that's a rough start to the year in those first 5 games in particular, and then once you get past New Orleans and Baltimore, then that gauntlet of the second half of the year with those road games, it just seems so unfair that the schedule makers would do this to them. So they are my 23rd ranked team, middle of the pack head coach, middle of the pack defense with an offense that's going to start the season on the lower end, but I don't expect them as the season goes on to just stay as a lower end offense. I would really watch out for them late in the year on the offensive side of the ball once Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson have sort of cauterized that chemistry between one another and they figured out all the roles of the weapons and everything. It's going to be a scary offense. Just not right away. This is the part of the video where we jump in with an ad break, but I don't have any ads yet. In fact, I'm getting just copyright strikes kind of all over the place for the footage I'm showing you guys. So let's get the subscribers up. You know, you can do that by helping to like the video as well. That'll get me out there and maybe get me some attention where I don't need to worry about videos being demonetized later on. So let's get back to the content though.